Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's video, I want to ask you something really important. Are you planning to move to Australia? Are you considering studying there? Or maybe you know someone who is. Because if any of these apply to you, what I'm about to share in the next few minutes could literally change the direction of your entire life. The decisions you make based on this information could mean the difference between achieving your dreams and watching them slip away. So please, stick with me till the end of this video, and more importantly, hit that subscribe button right now because we're going to be covering more updates like this, and you don't want to miss them. Trust me, this is information you'll want to have. Now, let's talk about something that's affecting thousands of people around the world right now. Australia, one of the most sought-after destinations for skilled workers, students, and families, has just announced significant changes to their immigration system for 2026, and these changes are going to impact your decisions, your finances, and your future. Let me break this down for you in a way that actually makes sense. For the last decade, Australia has been one of the top choices for people looking to build a better life. The country offers exceptional quality of life, strong economic opportunities, and a multicultural society that welcomes people from all corners of the globe. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. Immigration policies aren't static. They change, they evolve, and sometimes they shift dramatically. And 2026 is shaping up to be a year of significant transformation for Australia's immigration landscape. The Australian government has been grappling with a housing crisis, skills shortages in specific sectors, and the need to carefully balance workforce requirements with community integration. These pressures have forced policymakers to take a hard look at their immigration systems and make some tough decisions. And the results of those decisions are now being rolled out, creating new pathways for some people and closing doors for others. Let me start with changes to skilled migration because this is probably going to affect more people than anything else. For years, the skilled migration program has been the golden ticket for professionals looking to move to Australia permanently. If you had the right qualifications, the right experience, and you scored well on the points test, you had a genuine pathway to permanent residency. But things are changing, and not necessarily in the way that everyone was hoping. The Australian government has decided to introduce a new merit-based assessment system that goes beyond just points and qualifications. They're now looking at whether your specific skills align with current and projected labor market needs. This sounds reasonable on the surface, right? But here's what it means in practical terms. Even if you're highly qualified, even if you've got a master's degree and 10 years of experience, if your profession isn't on the priority list, your application might face significant delays or rejections. The government is essentially saying they want the right people in the right sectors, not just any skilled person. This has massive implications for professionals in fields like IT, finance, and engineering, which used to be automatic pathways to Australia. Now these sectors are becoming more competitive. The quotas are tighter, and the government is being more selective. At the same time, they're actively prioritizing certain areas like healthcare, aged care, early childhood education, and construction. So if you're a nurse, a physiotherapist, or a tradesperson, Australia is essentially rolling out a welcome mat. But if you're in other professions, the journey has become significantly more challenging. The processing times for skilled migration visas are also being extended. What used to take 6 to 12 months might now take 18 to 24 months or even longer. This creates uncertainty for people planning their futures. It means you might be in a holding pattern, unable to commit fully to staying in your current location or making other major life decisions. This emotional toll is something that often gets overlooked in these policy discussions, but it's real, and it affects thousands of families. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room: visa fees. And I want to be really honest with you here because this is going to shock some of you. The Australian government has decided to significantly increase visa fees across almost all categories, and the increases are substantial. We're talking about increases ranging from 20 to 40%, depending on the visa type and the applicant's circumstances. For skilled independent visas, which are the most popular pathway, the fees are jumping from around 4,300 Australian dollars to approximately 6,000 Australian dollars. That's a 50% increase. Now, if you're applying for your family, multiply that by the number of dependents, and suddenly we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars just for the application fees alone. And here's the kicker. If your application is rejected, the government is not refunding most of these fees. You're paying for the privilege of having your application assessed, regardless of the outcome. The government's justification for these increases is that they need to fund the immigration system, cover processing costs, and maintain the integrity of the program. But what this really means is that immigration to Australia is becoming increasingly expensive, and this creates a significant barrier for people who don't have substantial savings or financial support. It's essentially pricing out many people from lower and middle-income backgrounds, even if they have the qualifications and experience Australia needs. Student visas are also experiencing changes, and if you're a student or a parent considering sending your child to Australia for education, you need to pay close attention to this. The Australian government has tightened regulations around international student visas, and they've made the application process more stringent. The rationale is to combat student visa misuse and to ensure that students are genuinely coming to study, not to work their way into permanent residency. What does this mean practically? First, universities and colleges have to meet stricter requirements to accept international students. Second, students themselves now face more scrutiny during the application process. Third, there are new regulations about how much students are allowed to work while studying. Previously, students could work up to 20 hours per week during academic sessions and full-time during breaks. These rules are still in place, but the enforcement is tighter, and institutions are monitoring this more carefully. Additionally, the government has raised the required financial proof of funds. International students now need to demonstrate that they have more money available to support themselves during their studies. This is actually a positive thing in some ways because it suggests the government wants to ensure students aren't struggling financially while pursuing their education. But it also means more people need access to larger financial resources to make studying in Australia feasible. The tuition fees themselves aren't being directly controlled by the government, but there's pressure on institutions to maintain reasonable fee structures. However, what we're seeing is that universities are using the stricter regulations as an opportunity to be more selective. They're focusing on students from countries and backgrounds that they perceive as lower risk, which unfortunately can create unintended discrimination. New income thresholds are another major part of these 2026 changes, and this is where things get really interesting from an economic perspective. The Australian government has introduced new minimum income requirements for various visa categories, tied to Australia's average weekly wages. This is actually a significant shift in how they calculate eligibility. For skilled migrants, the income threshold is now set at approximately 90% of the average Australian wage for your occupation. This means that if you're coming to Australia on a skilled visa, you're expected to demonstrate that you can earn a salary that's competitive with what Australian workers in your field earn. On the surface, this seems reasonable. It's ensuring that foreign workers aren't undercutting local wages, which protects Australian workers and maintains wage standards. But here's the challenge. For many people from developing countries, the salary they earned in their home country is significantly lower than the Australian threshold, even if they're highly qualified and experienced. So they might struggle to demonstrate sufficient income history. Or they might be working at a salary level that's lower than the new thresholds, creating a catch-22 situation. The income threshold becomes a barrier not based on their capability or qualifications, but based on where they happen to be born and work. For employer-sponsored visas, these thresholds are actually a bit more flexible. If an employer is willing to sponsor you, they're essentially vouching that they can pay you at or above the threshold. But again, this tightens the employer's obligations and makes sponsoring foreign workers more expensive and more administratively burdensome. The income thresholds are also indexed, meaning they increase every year in line with Australian wage growth. So, as you move forward with your application process, these thresholds might increase, creating additional challenges. This creates a moving target that makes planning extremely difficult. There are also new regional income considerations. Australia is trying to encourage skilled migration to regional areas outside of Sydney and Melbourne, which are overcrowded. So, for those willing to move to regions like Queensland, Western Australia, or Tasmania, there are some incentives. The income thresholds can be slightly lower, and there are additional pathways available. But this also means that if you want to come to Australia's major cities, the barriers are higher. Let me talk about the human element here for a moment, because I think this is crucial. Every single one of these policy changes affects real people with real dreams, real families, and real aspirations. There's someone watching this video right now who's been saving money for years to apply for an Australian visa. Maybe they've been working extra hours, sacrificing vacations, cutting back on spending, all to save enough for the visa fees. And now, with a 50% increase in fees, that plan might not be financially feasible. There's another person who's been studying hard, preparing for the IELTS exam, working on their resume, all to apply to an Australian university. And now the financial requirements have increased, making it harder for their family to support their dream of studying in Australia. These aren't just policy changes. These are life-changing moments for people around the world. The Australian government might argue that these changes are necessary to manage immigration flows and protect the sustainability of their systems. And there's validity to that argument. But we also need to acknowledge that these changes are making it harder, more expensive, and more uncertain for people to pursue their dreams. They're making Australia less accessible to people from lower and middle income backgrounds, which raises questions about equity and fairness. Now, let's talk about what these changes mean for the future. If you're considering moving to Australia, you need to understand that the window might be closing, or at least the conditions are changing. The pathways that were relatively straightforward a few years ago are now more competitive, more expensive, and more uncertain. This doesn't mean Australia's closing its doors, but it does mean you need to be strategic and prepared. If you're in a priority field like healthcare or skilled trades, your situation is actually better than it was before. Australia actively wants these workers, and the pathways are relatively clear. If you're in other fields, you need to think carefully about whether the increased costs and reduced certainty make it worth pursuing. For students, the situation is similar. Australia is still welcoming international students, but the requirements are stricter. If you're genuinely interested in studying and building your career in Australia, the new regulations are manageable. But if you were thinking of using student visas as a backdoor to permanent residency, those pathways are now much harder to navigate. The income thresholds, while creating challenges, also have a bright side. They're ensuring that people coming to Australia on skilled visas will generally be earning decent salaries. This is good for you as an immigrant because it means you'll have financial stability. It's also good for the Australian economy and for local workers because it maintains wage standards. What's really important to understand is that immigration policy is always a balancing act. Australia needs to attract skilled workers to fill genuine gaps in their economy, but they also need to manage the impact of immigration on housing, infrastructure, community cohesion, and employment for local workers. These 2026 changes represent the government's current thinking on how to manage that balance. Looking forward, I expect we'll see continued evolution in these policies. As the housing crisis becomes more acute or resolves, as labor market needs shift, as political priorities change, we'll likely see further adjustments. What remains constant, however, is that Australia will likely maintain relatively selective immigration policies. The days of wide-open doors, if they ever truly existed, are behind us. So, what should you do if you're seriously considering moving to Australia? First, don't delay if you're eligible for current pathways. The longer you wait, the more expensive it might become. Second, research carefully which pathways are available for your situation. Don't assume that the visa category that worked for your friend will work for you. Third, budget generously for fees and other costs. The financial requirements are real, and you need to ensure you can meet them without putting yourself in a difficult position. Fourth, consider whether regional Australia might work for you. There are genuine incentives and opportunities outside the major cities, and these areas are often overlooked by people focused on Sydney or Melbourne. Fifth, if you're in a priority field, move forward with confidence. Healthcare workers, tradespeople, and others in critical sectors are wanted in Australia, and the process, while more regulated, is more straightforward. Finally, stay informed. Immigration policies change, and you want to make sure you're always working with the most current information. Subscribe to our channel because we'll keep you updated on any further changes or developments in immigration policy. In conclusion, Australia's 2026 immigration changes represent a significant shift toward a more selective, more expensive, and more regulated immigration system. These changes will affect thousands of people around the world who are dreaming of making Australia their home. While it's true that the barriers are higher, it's also true that genuine pathways still exist. The key is understanding those pathways, assessing whether they're right for you, and being prepared for the financial and time investments required. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope it's given you some clarity on what's changing and what it means for your situation. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you have questions or want to share your own experience with Australian immigration, leave a comment below. And please subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of immigration policy, international education, and opportunities for building your life abroad. We're here to help you navigate these complex systems, so don't go it alone. This is just the beginning of understanding how these changes might affect your future. Stay informed, stay prepared, and never stop pursuing your dreams. See you in the next video, friends. Goodbye.